Hi and welcome back. So today we are going to look at chapter 7 on representation of the people. So all the subtopics we'll discuss in the Constitution under this chapter include the general principles of elections, legislation on elections, voter registration. Excuse me, something's in my throat. We'll discuss code of conduct for candidates who are interested to vie for a political seat, eligibility of candidates, voting, and dispute mechanisms for election disputes. All right, so the general principles for the electoral system, that is under Article 81, the electoral system shall comply with the following principles. So we have freedom of citizens, that is obvious, to exercise their political rights. We have not more than 2/3 of members of elective public bodies shall be of the same gender. So this is the 2/3 rule, gender balance and mainstreaming in elective public bodies. The third principle is fair representation of persons with disabilities, universal suffrage based on the aspiration for fair representation and equality of vote, free and fair elections, that is, it goes without saying, which are by secret ballot. So the system of voting in Kenya is by secret ballot. It should also be free from violence. This mentioning violence takes me back to the post 2007 election violence. So this is this constitution was passed in 2010 as a result of a public referendum. So one of the key issues that this constitution was going to address was going to be violence, political violence, yeah. So it doesn't come as a surprise that one of the principles is freedom from violence, intimidation, improper influence, or corruption. And the election should be conducted by an independent body and should be transparent and impartial. All right, we are done with that part. Moving on to legislation on elections. As of now, we have the Elections Act. Under Article 82, Parliament shall enact legislation to provide for. So this Elections Act is to provide for delimitation by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission of electoral units for election of members of the National Assembly and county assemblies. It should also provide for nomination of candidates. It should provide for the continuous registration of citizens as voters and the conduct of elections and referenda, regulation and supervision of elections and referenda, including nomination of candidates for elections. The other item that the Elections Act is supposed to provide is progressive registration of citizens. All right, residing outside Kenya, and the progressive realization of their right to vote. So it's interesting to note that the Kenyans living in foreign countries also hold voting rights, all right? And they are supposed to be registered. If they choose to vote, they're entitled to suffrage, their right to vote, and choose the person they want. Legislation required by Clause 1D shall ensure that voting at every election is. So this is more in depth about the legislation or the act. It should be simple, all right? It should be transparent. It should be considerate of the needs of persons with disabilities. So the voting stations should be friendly to people who are abled differently, all right? And other persons or groups with special needs. So that is it. The simplicity of the exercise, so that it can cater to whoever is old, the elderly, people who are able differently, because had it been complex, I'm sure most of the population of Kenya would have been disadvantaged. Registration as a voter is the third topic. Under Article 83, a person qualifies for registration when they reach the age of 18 years, which is the age of adulthood in Kenya. And a person is qualified if they are not declared to be insane. So people of sane mind are qualified to be registered as a voter. A person who has not been convicted of an election offense, so you must also not have been convicted of an election offense in the last 5 years. Sabbatical 2, a citizen who qualifies for registration as a voter shall be registered at only one registration center. So if you live in, for example, Mkomani ward, you register at a station that will be in Mkomani ward, and you can't register in other places at the same time. Yeah. Administrative arrangements for the registration of voters and the conduct of elections shall be designed, all right, to facilitate and shall not deny an eligible citizen the right to vote or stand for election. So they mentioned the conduct of elections. So administrative arrangement. Okay, this thing is under the mandate of the IEBC. They do all the administrative work in relation to elections in Kenya. That is the independent, what was it again? Electoral and Boundaries Commission. So we move on to Article 84 of the Constitution of Kenya. Candidates for election and political parties must comply with what we call the Code of Conduct, all right? This actually exists. I think it was the IEBC that came up with this code. It outlines how candidates are supposed to behave during the election exercise, what they are supposed to refrain from doing, and other restrictions, what principles they are supposed to comply with, like transparency, non-discrimination, all those things, under Article 10 of the Constitution, the principles of governance. All right, so we move on. Eligibility to stand. Eligibility to stand as an independent candidate. What are you supposed to have, all right, to qualify as a candidate? Under Article 85, any person is eligible to stand as an independent candidate for election if he or she is not a member of a registered political party. So long as they are not a member of a registered political party, and has not been a member for at least 3 months immediately before the date of the election. I don't get this. Alright, I don't get this. I have no experience in elections, but I believe everyone has freedom of association, but I really have no idea. Let me not lie. Let's move on. This person must also satisfy the requirements of Article 99 in the case of a candidate for election to the National Assembly or Senate, or Article 193 in the case of a candidate for election to a county assembly. Should we take a look at this? Let's just look at them. So 99. All right, so 991C 1 and 2. 1C. Also, this Article 99 is on qualifications and disqualifications for election as a member of parliament. So there are special rules for special posts, all right? And there's special qualifications for special positions, all right? So if someone is vying for a seat at the National Assembly or Senate, this person must fulfill this qualification or requirement. They have to be nominated by a political party or must be an independent candidate who is supported by at least 1,000 registered voters in a constituency, or in the case of election to the Senate, by at least 2,000 registered voters in the county. All right, so Article 193 says, in the case of a candidate for election to a county assembly, Article 193, what qualification is this person supposed to have? 193. All right, here we are. 193, 1C, 2. 1C. Qualifications for election as member of county assembly. They must be nominated by a political party. And 1C2. And or be an independent candidate supported by at least 500 registered voters in the ward concerned. So if this person is from Nkumani ward, they will be having the support of at least minimum 500 registered voters. And if that's not the case, they should be nominated by a political party. All right. Moving on. Now we are talking about voting. That is under Article 86. What is it about? Are there any systems the Constitution is providing for? What is it? Let's just say, at every election, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission shall ensure the following. Okay. So I said before, we'll take a look in, under Article 88 about the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. What is it and what it's supposed to do? But it's basically the boss when it comes to elections. They overlook the elections process, the counting, and so on and so forth. All right, so at every election, the IEBC will do the following. Number one, whatever voting method is used, the system has to be simple. So they will ensure the system is simple, that is for easier accessibility to everybody, accurate, verifiable, secure, accountable, and transparent. The second thing they will do is ensure the votes casts are counted. So they are also in charge of the counting, tabulated, and the results are announced immediately or promptly or quickly by the presiding officer at each polling station. The third thing they will do is ensure the results from the polling stations are openly and accurately collated and promptly announced by the returning officer. All right. And the last thing they'll do is ensure appropriate structures and mechanisms to eliminate electoral malpractices or malpractice are put in place, including safekeeping of election materials. So that is self-explanatory. It's basically this body is going to overlook the entire voting process. That is what the Constitution provides for under Article 86. Let's move on, please, to electoral disputes. All right, what they are, how they are, where somebody goes, who handles. All right, Article 87. Parliament shall enact legislation to establish mechanisms for timely settling of electoral disputes. So Parliament is the one that is supposed to come up with an act to establish mechanisms for dispute resolution. All right. Number two, petition. I don't know if this act, but I'm sure it exists. I just don't know what is the name of this act. So we move on. Petitions concerning an election other than a presidential election shall be filed within 28 days. I think this is the Elections Act, if I'm not wrong. So if somebody is unsatisfied with the results or is aggrieved by the method of the elections, how it took place, or does not agree with the result, they petition concerning this grievance. All right, and these petitions must be filed in case of a presidential election within 28 days. All right, so there's a very short timeline here. Has to be filed within 28 days after the declaration of the election results by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. So that is what you need to know. It's a very short timeline. So, lastly, service of a petition may be direct or by advertisement in a newspaper with national circulation. So this is either directly by by way of handing it over to the person, to the office, to there are so many ways you can serve. All right, or by advertisement. Now part 2, let's talk about or see what this IEBC is and what it's in charge of doing. So the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Under Article 88, there is established the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. All right. A person is not eligible for appointment as a member of the commission if the person, all right, has at any time within the preceding 5 years held office or stood for election as a member of parliament or of a county assembly or a member of the governing body of a political party. So I think it's more about looking at the whole structure of the IEBC, the commissioners, all right, their appointment, their qualification. So it's more internal, all right. Then we'll talk also about their responsibilities, what they are supposed to do. So a person will be appointed as a member of IEBC only if the person does not fall under these two categories. One, he was a member or he held an office or stood for election as a member of parliament within the last 5 years, or a county assembly, or member of county assembly, or a member of the governing body of a political party. All right. So number 2, holds any state office. So this person should not hold any state office prior to their appointment to the IEBC. Now, sub-article 3 says a member of the commission shall not hold another public office. All right. Yeah. Now, at sub-article 4, the commission is responsible for doing the following things. They are responsible for conducting or supervising referenda, all right, and elections to any elective body. So they supervise and they conduct the entire process. So they conduct all elections and supervise also referendums. So in the case there's a public referendum to change, for example, the constitution, to amend it, or create another one, it would be up to them, right, to take care of the entire process. And any other elections as prescribed by an act of parliament. All right, so we know that. Now, what else are they supposed to do? What are their duties or responsibilities? Number 1, they will have to conduct continuous registration of citizens as voters. So they register people to vote, okay? Number 2, the regular revision of the voters' roll. So they revise also the voters' roll, where all the names of registered voters are found in Kenya. They also conduct delimitation of constituencies and wards. All right. They also do regulation of the process by which parties nominate candidates. All right, for elections. They also oversee settlement of electoral disputes, including disputes relating to or arising from nominations, but excluding election petitions, and disputes subsequent to the declaration of election results. So their mandate is only up to a certain point, but once the results are declared, all right, if there are any grievances or any disputes, then they do not handle that. It goes to the courts. So they settle disputes during the election process, all right, arising from nominations, but excluding election petitions and disputes subsequent to the declaration of election results. So that's just what I say. They handle these disputes during the process, but once elections have been declared, election results, any grievance, any disputes about the process, everything will be handled by the courts. So the registration of candidates for election, they also, we said this. Why are we repeating ourselves? So another thing they have to do is voter education. So they sensitize the community about voting, their right to vote. I would imagine they'll be telling people how to vote, where do you tick, who do what is the appropriate way of ticking or checking the box of the person you want, maybe what you are not supposed to do, okay, when you're putting your marks or checking or choosing the person. You can't mark maybe double places or multiple places at the same time, things like that. All right. The facilitation of the observation, monitoring, and evaluation of elections. So they will also conduct facilitation of observation, monitoring, and evaluation. All right. So this is M and E, monitoring and evaluation. Of course, they do this just so that everything is running up to speed and there are no malpractices, challenges, of course, in the election process. Since this is like an infinite thing, elections will happen as forever. As long as there is presidency and governorship, there will always be elections. So it's important that this process is there to analyze, what can be done to make the whole process more efficient, what challenges are there, and so forth. So another thing they do is regulate the amount of money that may be spent by or on behalf of a candidate or party in respect of any election. So this is, I think, money, campaigning money, I think, if I'm not wrong. They also conduct development of a code of conduct for candidates. I said this one actually exists and I've seen it. So there is a code of conduct, okay, where candidates are supposed to conduct themselves with, ethics and mind the public interest, refuse from or avoid tarnishing the reputation of other candidates, or sabotaging their elections, things like that, corruption practices and everything. I think this code of conduct also offers penalties, if I'm not wrong. All right, so another responsibility is monitoring of compliance with the legislation required by Article 82(1)(b) relating to nomination of candidates by parties. And finally, the Commission shall exercise its powers and perform its functions in accordance with its Constitution and national legislation. So that's it about this commission, the IEBC. What they do is just register voters, register citizens as voters, revise the voters' roll, delimit constituencies and wards in a county, regulate the process, by which these political parties are nominated. We said in the previous article that for a candidate who is vying for a seat at the National Assembly, they have to be nominated under Article 99, and for County Assembly under 193, if I'm not wrong. Or I think I am wrong. I don't remember. So being nominated is like the huge qualification for eligibility. You must be the huge requirement to be eligible. So they oversee this process also. They settle electoral disputes only up to a point. Once any disputes arises subsequent to the election results announcement, that's it. Their hands are tied. It goes to the courts. Now, the registration of candidates, we say this, they educate and sensitize the community or the public on voting. They observe and monitor elections. for efficient elections, yeah, to improve on them. They regulate the amount of campaigning money and they develop the code of conduct. So that's about it. All right, so let's move on quickly and just finish this. We're almost done, yeah, with the chapter. So we move to Article 89, the limitation of electoral units. So there shall be 290 constituencies for the purposes of election of the members of the National Assembly. Okay, so 290 constituencies. The IEBC shall review the names and boundaries of constituencies at intervals of not less than 8 years and not more than 12 years. Okay, so they will revise these boundaries every 8 years. Okay. The Commission shall review the number, names, and boundaries of wards periodically. If a general election is to be held within 12 months after the completion of a review by the Commission, the new boundaries shall not take effect for purposes of that election. All right, I have no experience with this, so let's just read. Maybe we'll understand something. So the boundaries of each constituency shall be such that the number of inhabitants in the constituency is as nearly as possible equal to the population quota, but the number of inhabitants of a constituency may be greater or lesser than the population quota in the manner mentioned in Clause 6 to take account of the geographical features and urban centers, community of interest, historical, economic, and cultural ties, means of communication. The number of inhabitants of a constituency or ward may be greater or lesser than the population quota by a margin of not more than 40% for cities and sparsely populated areas, and 30% for the other areas. In reviewing constituency and ward boundaries, the Commission shall consult all interested parties and progressively work towards ensuring that the number of inhabitants in each constituency and ward is as nearly as possible equal to the population quota. If necessary, the Commission shall alter or change the names and boundaries of constituencies and the number, names, and boundaries of wards. All right, subject to clauses 1, 2, 3, and 4, the names and details of the boundaries of constituencies and wards determined by the Commission shall be published in the Gazette and shall come into effect on the dissolution of Parliament first following their publication. A person may apply to the High Court for review of a decision of the Commission made under this article. An application for the review of a decision made under this article shall be filed within 30 days of the publication of the decision in the Gazette and shall be heard and determined within 3 months. For the purposes of this article, population quota means the number obtained by dividing the number of inhabitants of Kenya by the number of constituencies or wards as applicable, into which Kenya is divided under this article. So we have the number of population. I think we are at, was it 40 million or more than that? Maybe 50, I don't know. Dividing the number of inhabitants of Kenya by the number of constituencies or wards as applicable. Yeah, we said in the beginning there are 290, all right, constituencies. Now, allocation, we move on to Article 90, allocation of party list seats. Elections for the seats in Parliament provided for under Articles 97, 1C and 98, 1B, C and D, and for the members of county assemblies under 177, 1B and C, shall be on the basis of proportional representation by use of party lists. All right. So the IEBC shall be responsible for the conduct and supervision of elections for seats provided for under Clause 1 and shall ensure the following. Each political party participating in a general election nominates and submits a list of all the persons who would stand elected if the party were to be entitled to all the seats provided for under Clause 1 within the time prescribed by national legislation. So the political party, all right, submits a list of the persons, okay, they have nominated for those various positions, okay. So we have, like, let's say, yellow, political party yellow is power, would have, like, would nominate their person for the seat of the president, the deputy president, like that, and it goes on and on. Yeah. This thing is so alien to me. So please excuse me. We'll need to do our own research, see how it's done. So number 2, except in the case of the seats provided under Article 98, each party list comprises the appropriate number of qualified candidates and alternates between male and female candidates in the priority in which they are listed. Third, except in the case of county assembly seats, each party list reflects the regional and ethnic diversity of the people of Kenya. Yeah. And lastly, the seats mentioned in Clause 1 shall be allocated to political parties in proportion to the total number of seats won by candidates of the at the general election. This thing. Let's move on. Part 3, political parties. Now, basic requirements for political parties under Article 91. Every political party shall have a national character as prescribed by an act of parliament, have a democratically elected governing body, promote and uphold national unity, abide by the democratic principles of good governance under Article 10, promote and practice democracy through regular, fair and free elections within the party, respect the right of all persons to participate in the political process, including children, did I say children? Including minorities and marginalized groups, okay? Respect and promote human rights and fundamental freedoms and gender equality and equity, promote objects and principles of this constitution and rule of law, subscribe to and observe the code of conduct here for political parties. A political party shall not be founded on a religious, linguistic, racial, ethnic, gender, or regional basis, or seek to engage in advocacy of hatred on any such basis. So any political party must avoid hate speech, must avoid any discriminatory notions based on religion, language, tribalism, racism, ethnicity, gender, original basis. Yeah. Also, it will also avoid engaging in or encouraging violence. So no violence, no hate speech, no discrimination. intimidation, either of its members, supporters, opponents, or any other person. They should also avoid maintaining a paramilitary force, militia, or similar organization. So they cannot recruit an army and use it or something like that. They will not engage in bribery or other forms of corruption, except as is provided under this chapter or by an act of parliament, accept or use public resources. So they will not they will not accept or use public resources to promote its interests. Yeah, this makes sense. Excuse me. Moving on, legislation on political parties. Under Article 92, Parliament shall enact legislation to provide for reasonable and equitable allocation of airtime by state-owned and other mentioned categories of broadcasting media to political parties, either generally or during election campaigns. They will also the parliament should also enact legislation to regulate freedom to broadcast in order to ensure fair election campaigning. This legislation will also regulate political parties, will also oversee roles and functions of political parties, will also oversee registration and supervision of political parties. It will provide for the registration and supervision of a political party, the establishment and management of a political party's fund, the accounts and audit of political parties, restrictions on the use of public resources to promote interests of political parties, and any other necessary matters. So this, let me just check this. This legislation for political parties, the name, what it is. Let me see. So it is the Political Parties Act of 2011. Yeah, that is the legislation that has been enacted by Parliament to regulate political parties registration and everything to do with political parties. All right. All right, so that is the act, the Political Parties Act. So thank you. That concludes our chapter. Was it chapter 7? Yes, of the Constitution of Kenya on elections and representation of the people. We talked about the body or commission that is in charge of elections, and that is the IEBC. We said their responsibilities were to register voters, revise the role, oversee elections process, deal with disputes during the election process, and all these other amazing things they do. We also saw that there's a Political Parties Act, which is supposed to regulate all this, the conduct of political parties, their registration and everything else, their accounts and audits, and so forth. So with that, thank you and have a nice day or night. Bye.